Welcome, Pharaoh fans. It's me, your host, MNG. And you know I want to bring you some of the best information out there that I can possibly give so you can make a worldwide decision and you can grow and find growth in life and find growth through all the podcasts that we're doing. So today we have Steve Melman here today, and he is going to provide us with some great wealth of information. We're going to have a great conversation. So, Steve, one of the things that I want to ask you, and we kind of met and we talked, but I wanted to kind of jump into the email correspondence that we had. I seen that you have a book out called Guidance for New Clinicians in a Chaotic World, and how to practice your craft while preserving your traditional values. So can you just kind of give the audience a little information about that book?
Sure. So the book was originally written to help new clinicians, but as I was writing the book, I wanted to make sure that it was appropriate for and that lay people could benefit from the book as well. So I provide things like tips to help marital couples and how to help people who are depressed and feeling anxious and substance abuse issues. And I hope it's a very inspirational and motivational book to help all people.
So now you said substance abuse, depression.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other categories that are covered in there? Because I'm sure that there are a number of people that suffer from depression. And we recently talked about how the pandemic has mentally affected the next generation, and how some of them during that time was going through depression. They were going through mental illness. They were going through a lot of things that was impacting them because the most important years of their life was ripped away from them.
That's true.
Was stopped, in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So when we talk about and just referring to your book, and we're going to get into the meat and grits of the conversation as well, but just referring to your book, when we're talking about depression, we're talking about substance abuse, because some people do turn to substance abuse because they are in a position where they have nowhere else to turn. And you may or may not agree with this, but I believe that when people have their back against the wall, they turn to one or two things. The first thing is religion. The other thing is to some type of substance abuse. Okay, so you got to find some relief somewhere, and that's my own personal opinion based on my experience of people that I've had conversations with, and they find themselves in very traumatic experiences, and they need something to either dull the pain or they need something to fill that empty void. So that's my personal opinion. So what other categories in your book do you cover?
I cover, yes, I do cover how COVID impacted people, kids, adolescents, adults. I cover anxiety. I cover marital topics, schizophrenia. What else? And lots of different things that can help people change how they look at things, or to reframe things, to see things. People don't have to see things in a negative way; they can see things in a positive way. How to get themselves out of the funk they feel like they're in.
Okay. And where is this book located? Like, where can they get this book so they can get these tips and tricks of how to see
just about anywhere where they can purchase books online, from Amazon to Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. There's probably 10 different places where they could buy it. It's not available at a bookstore, but it is available online.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and just jump into this conversation. And some of the things that we're talking about, we're talking about relationships. And everybody has relationship issues, whether they have relationships at work, and it's not relationship issues so far as going together, marital issues, or anything like that. It's just a variety of relationships that you have in your life that you're trying to maintain and you're trying to keep effective. Okay, and one of the questions that I have is, what are some of the most common root causes of conflict in relationships?
Boy, and we only have a limited amount of time, but things like for no in no set order. One of the ones is financial issues, differences in how we handle finances, from credit card debt. Some people, they whatever they put on a credit card, they pay it off in the same month as due. And other people are quite comfortable with having all kinds of debt on multiple credit cards. As one person can be a saver, another person can be a spender. Other stressors would be a division of labor within the household. If one person feels like they're doing it all and the other person is sitting on the laurels and not doing much, that can create conflicts. In-law issues, family issues, difference in parenting skills and styles. There's all kinds of stressors that can affect. Whether if one person becomes unemployed, does that create a stress? Well, of course it does. It creates a stressor. So there's all kinds of things that can create conflicts in a relationship.
So let's explore some of those. Like
Sure.
I'm interested now. Let's explore some of those. So let's look at one party is a saver and the other one is a spender. Okay.
Mhm.
Now obviously these are two people that's on completely total dynamics so far as how they handle their money management, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that amongst divorce, finances and infidelity kind of in the top 5. Okay, we
Yes.
can definitely say they're in the top 5, right?
Yes.
So when we're looking at that, and we're looking at going into relationships with money issues, leaving a relationship with money issues, what are some tips to kind of remedy that kind of conflict with money? Because we know you could talk about it, right? But obviously there's a step process where the person that's the spender has to become more of a saver. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the person that's a saver can be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more lenient on spending and finding that common ground, right?
Yep.
So what are some tips and tricks on how they can kind of find some kind of commonality where it's beneficial for both of them?
All right. So let me take a step back and let me offer something. So a lot of people think that opposites attract.
Right.
And I prefer to say it. People complement each other. If people are too similar to one another, that can create a conflict. We're usually not attracted to people who are too similar to us. So we tend to find and people who complement us. So a good, healthy relationship is one who they identify each other's strengths. I always say the opposite, our strengths are not weaknesses, or just things we haven't made into strengths yet. And yet, though, we acknowledge each other's strengths. So you say, well, I tend to be a spender. You're the saver. How about I could benefit from spending less and let you handle the finances, since that appears to be your strengths.
Mm.
And I happen to be such a saver that I can't appreciate the moment because I can't tend to part with any money because it creates anxiety spending money. So I'm always a constant saver. So you could compliment me to appreciate what we have and enjoy our life together. Because when it comes to money, you can't take it with you.
That is true. That's true. That's true. So I like that because you need somebody that's going to compliment you, and whatever their strengths are, rely on their strengths, and whatever your weakness is, let them be the strength to that, and vice versa, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm trying to remember the other ones. There's a few in there I wanted to jump on. I should have been taking notes. All right. So looking at some of those other common root issues, how do an individual deal with somebody, as you were saying earlier, I just had it and I lost it just that quickly.
It's all right. You'll get it back. I got faith in you.
You got faith in me? But let's jump. Okay, let's jump back in. Okay, so when we're looking at individuals that have, let's just say this, they have communication issues. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody that overly communicates, and you have somebody that over communicates, and you have somebody that under communicates. Okay. where is the commonality in there where they could be like, okay, I over communicate, you under communicate. I need you to communicate more to me about things. But when you make it so blanketed, then they got to pick and choose, or they make a determination that, okay, well, let me over communicate all of this stuff because I under communicate. And then the person that over communicates, like, okay, well, maybe they're deciding on whether I should say this, whether I should not say this, should I tell this, should I not tell this? And then it's just this whole, well, you know what, I just won't say anything at all.
Okay, you got a lot there to unpack.
Yeah.
So, look, all right. So let me see if I can help. But what I try to do with people that I encounter is paint mental pictures. So one of the things that makes us human is that we talk to ourselves, and it's okay to admit that. That's one of the things that makes us human is we talk to ourselves. So, and our self-talk can either be positive or negative.
Right.
So in our head, just because we say something in our head doesn't mean that's exactly the way we need to verbalize it out loud to an individual. Okay?
See, that's why I disagree with you.
All right, go for it. Go for it.
That's kind of where I disagree at. You know, so a friend of mine used to always tell me that I had no tech about the things that I say, and that I say things the first thing that come to my mind. And I kind of thought, I was like, no, you're supposed to say the first thing that comes to your mind because people appreciate honesty, right? People
Well,
appreciate honesty. I will agree, depending on the environment and the location you're at, you may have to have a little softer blow. But people appreciate honesty. It don't have to be brutal honesty.
well, I was just going to use that same word. The difference between being honest and being brutal.
Okay.
Okay, so if I am a clinician, I'm a psychotherapist, I got to be careful that if I'm brutally honest with people and I don't pick and choose my words carefully, I'm gonna lose clients. I don't think I want to see you anymore. I used to have a colleague who shot people between the eyes with their words. But before she could do that, she had to establish a rapport with that individual.
Okay. Okay.
So I am of the opinion, I agree with you, to be honest with people.
Definitely.
Okay, but let me offer you this. When I was growing up, my parents said to me as I was growing up, "You are the most stubborn child." Well, what did I know? I was 5 years old, 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
As I got further into school, we learned that there are synonyms for every single word. So I learned that no, I'm not stubborn. I'm persistent. I'm tenacious. So let me shift and give you another example. So if I'm your supervisor and it's time for the yearly evaluation, and I wanted to say to you, I want to give you some constructive criticism. You're thinking in your mind, I don't care how constructive it is. The word I centered on was criticism. Who wants to be criticized?
Okay.
So if I said to you instead, how about I offer you some constructive feedback? And you're starting to think, well, that's more palatable than being criticized.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we don't have to be brutal with the words we use, to be blatantly honest to such an extent that it hurts people's feelings.
Okay.
So in our head we can pick and choose what words do I want to use that's going to allow a person to want to communicate with me rather than shutting down or getting angry themselves at me.
Okay.
And it could ruin the relationship if people are that brutally honest and their feelings are hurt.
Now that makes sense. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
Okay. All right.
Now, I will rebuttal that with saying that creating a rapport is good.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, people are very selective on what they hear. And sometimes honesty is the one thing that they do hear
Mm-hmm.
in a brutal sense. So
All right. So let me come back before I lost a train of thought with it as you did for a moment ago. Let me back up and say, well, you people, you're right. People are selective of what they hear. So I want to piggyback on that.
Okay.
They say that in a lot of cases, we as listeners only hear about 60% of what people are saying.
Mm.
Well, why isn't it higher than 60%? Well, oftentimes we're thinking about, so what's going to be our rebuttal? Oh,
True.
I can't wait to challenge them on that.
Mm. Yeah.
Or it could be, it's getting close to lunchtime or dinner time. What am I going to have for dinner? What am I going to be doing after this interview? And so on. So we're thinking about all different kinds of things other than really paying attention to what the other person's saying.
Mm. True.
So listening is an art. So just like you're doing with me, as I'm talking, you're nodding your head. Well, nodding your head doesn't always mean that we agree with each other, but oftentimes it means we're following each other's train of thought.
Right.
Okay, so we can use eye contact,
Yeah.
and we can boost and really, really, really listen to each other with the words we're using and not trying to think about how we're going to rebut what the other person said. And when the speaker finishes talking, the listener can say to the speaker, let me summarize what I heard you say, so that we make sure that both of us are going to be understood.
That's
And that it allows the original speaker to say, yeah, that's what I meant, or not exactly. Let me say that again. Oh, okay, now I hear you saying da 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 da. So we're going to do that back and forth.
now. That's good you mentioned that because I have been telling people that I have read or I had listened to a audio book on communication.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, before I go there, one of the things I hear people say is that they appreciate communication in relationships. And communication is the foundation for everything. But if you sit here and you ask them, like, well, what is communication? Well, they would say, which is the typical answer, is, well, is you're talking to me and I'm listening. And when you say something back, I listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, you know what? That is a good answer, but it's not a perfect answer or it's not the right answer. So, and it's all based on terminology. So when we talk about communication, it's not about listening and receiving. Okay. So we can listen and receive what each other is saying, but if we put active listening in front, then we change the complete definition of listening. Okay. Because I could be
Mm-hmm.
listening to you but heard nothing that you said. But if
Mm-hmm.
I'm actively listening, then now we're entering into a different realm of communication. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we go in and we throw in comprehension in there, and I was briefly watching the show and they were saying about communication and comprehension. I agree. Comprehension should be in there, but you can't say comprehension without perspective. Because what happens is that I can comprehend what you said, but my perspective on what you said is going to contribute to what my rebuttal is going to be. And then that is going to change the whole definition and the whole dimension of the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once we get those two things in there, right? I know I went on a little spell. So once we throw those two things in there, as you had stated, listening intently to the conversation, actively listening, and then at the end, once a person is done what they're saying, if if what you perceive that they said and what you comprehended what they said is different, then you don't want to really accuse them of saying something that they didn't say, because what they're saying is how they perceive that they're saying it to you. So the summary comes in to say, hey, did you say this? Did you say that? Which pulls out the idea of active listening, because you won't be able to summarize if you wasn't active listening, but more so thinking about the rebuttal that you're going to provide.
I like the word you use, perceive.
Yes.
Yes, because I want to make sure that what I perceived was accurate.
Exactly.
And then that's where you summarize what you heard the other person saying. And if my perception was inaccurate, there's your opportunity to correct the so that now my perceptions are in line with what your intent was.
Exactly. Now, speaking on now, it's interesting that we went into this part. So let's move on to our next question, which is how can people navigate difficult conversations without escalating tension? And this is pretty much the core foundation of what we're talking about, is because going into those difficult conversations, one, you got to have a decent approach to that conversation. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just walk in and say, you know what, I got an issue with you. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Like, the other person will go on defense and say, "Oh, they got an issue with me. Okay, what's your issue?" Then the kind of the tension starts to build up from that conversation, and then it turns into an argument.
And you're absolutely right. And so, what you want to do, first of all, is you want to, words have power, words have meaning. And so, I want to make sure that our discussion doesn't escalate into an argument. So, we can say before it escalates to an argument, we can have a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how are we going to resolve resolve that conflict and get past it?
Right.
So it doesn't escalate. Once it gets to an argument, now it takes a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
Well, then there are we're no longer dealing with things rationally. Now our emotions are inflamed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And sometimes people say things they didn't mean. And I'm back to that again. We want to keep it in our head and making decisions about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, the tone of voice, and all that. And I can say all kinds of words that I want to say in my head, but if I know that if I'm mindful, if I say that exactly the way I intend to, what's that going to do to our conversation, our relationship? Is it going to help it or hurt it? So
Mm-hmm.
if I cuss at you or I talk about personality or whatever, we're no longer talking about the issue anymore. Now we're defending ourselves.
Facts. Facts.
Yeah.
So, and talking about that, and that's what everybody want to do. Everybody want to protect their own who they are. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they do get a defensive, because they perceive that, hey, I'm not doing this, I'm not in the wrong, it's you, right? So when we're looking at that, and what strategies do you recommend to de-escalating conflicts in those tense situations?
Okay. First of all, don't see things as right versus wrong.
Yep,
Uh,
okay, that's a good one.
okay. Yep. This is if I'm winning, that must mean you're losing.
Right.
Right. So nobody wants to win if the other person has to lose.
That is true. That is
Okay.
true.
So you could take the analogy of the best basketball team. They can't win if it's all on one person's shoulders.
That is true.
So in a relationship, to achieve goals, we have to work together.
And I was just going to mention that in order for a situation, even in the heat of the moment, that you're having this conversation, at some point in time, you got to step back and say, you know what, this has really gotten out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should kind of just take a step back, cool off. And my best strategy in the heat of the moment conversation is just to walk away.
Yeah.
You know what? And that was a situation. It was a situation where the argument was getting heated. It was getting very loud. Almost to where items might have get thrown, fists might have get thrown, and everything. And I was just like, you know what? This is not a situation that I want to be in, and I need to walk away from this. And I think this is, and that should be the perspective of every man when dealing, when I say this, the opposite sex, and any situation where it may be unsafe for you to even step into the challenging arena, because in some cases it could be a lot deadlier than you think. You don't need to step to every challenge. So even at work, there's just certain situations that you do not need to speak on, comment on, or anything. You got to pick your battles, because you can get into a heated conversation with anybody, with a customer, with anybody in any realm, and this is moving away from kind of like relationships, but just when you're having the escalating conflicts from a customer service standpoint, sometimes it's easier to listen than to try to engage in a conversation of a back and forth.
Okay. So, all right. So let's backtrack for a moment. And one of the things I try to teach couples to do, even when I was working with the Federal Employee Assistance Program, I was teaching communication skills to federal employees. It's going to the very, very basics of, we're back to that again, which is I can say anything I want to in my head, but I got to make sure that before I verbalize it out loud, it's got to be productive. If I'm unsure, if I'm in doubt, don't say it. And you're absolutely right that the phrase you were going to use, which was taking occasional timeouts.
Mm-hmm.
So if I backtrack for a moment and I say, one of the things we can teach kids how to do is to take timeouts, but we say with their clenched teeth when our child's on their last nerve, and you go, no, sit in the timeout chair. Instead of teaching kids that, just like with adults, we all have emotions.
Right.
Frustration, anger, all those negative emotions. And it's okay when we feel like we're being flooded with those emotions, those negative emotions, is saying, I think I need to take a time out. So in a marital relationship or between an employee, co-workers, maybe we need to say that too. My emotions are getting the best of me. I think I need to take a time out. There's this expression, I don't care how salient the points you're wanting to make, what's coming across instead is your anger. And as long as I'm hearing your anger, I can't hear the message behind the words you're using.
True.
So then again, we need to get control over our emotions to be able to make sure that the message behind our words are being received.
So speaking of emotions, how big of a part does emotional intelligence play into that?
I think a lot. Yeah. Yeah. We have to be. Go ahead.
Because emotional intelligence was one of the things that I wanted to study the most when I was in management. And they start offering these classes on emotional intelligence, and psychology is like one of my favorite subjects. Um, a lot of people don't understand how much of a role psychology plays in management.
Mm-hmm.
It plays a really big role. So knowing psychology, even when you do supervisor training classes, they incorporate a little psychology into the training classes. And if you want to be a great supervisor, great manager, director, or anything, my best advice is to take up just the basic psychology. It don't even have to be advanced. Just the basic psychology, just to understand different psychology, even the founding psychologists. I read a book on the founding psychologists, and it was like Psychology 101. Great book. I mean, very, very great book on some of the founding principles and practices on a lot of different things. And um, and one of the things that I like the most about emotional intelligence is one, it teaches you to be able to understand yourself emotionally, understand what your triggers are, and that's a great thing for a relationship. But it's also great because you know the certain things that trigger you, so you can avoid them. Okay, you know when you're in the midst of an argument and somebody says something that triggers you, and you're just like, you know what? I know that triggers me. I'm not going to fall for it this time. So you gather such an understanding about yourself that is applicable going forward in relationships, partnerships, whatever the case is. The other thing I like about emotional intelligence was just a little bit more difficult to harness is being able to recognize other people's feelings even through nonverbal cues. And well, not their feeling, but understand like if there's something wrong through nonverbal cues, even if it's a very subtle nonverbal cue. And reading on it And it's like, man, that's a little bit more kind of difficult to kind of hone and everything. But as you get to know yourself more and your triggers and your nonverbal cues, you start to be able to see some other people's little nuances, to
Mm-hmm.
say the least.
Mm-hmm.
To say the least. But and I'll close it out with this: is that if you are a supervisor, manager, if you're in management whatsoever, whether you're a lead or not, the basic psychology principles and practices and a little bit of emotional intelligence will go a long way with being able to manage your staff.
Okay. Before I forget, there's something you said that I want to circle back to about when you said that I feel like I'm being triggered and I don't have to respond this time. You actually used that I was referring to in the past, which was talking about we can say anything in our head that we want to. Uh, it doesn't have to come out loud, and so when you said I'm being triggered, now you have different choices of how you want to respond.
Exactly.
So you're making use of that self talk, and now you have a whole array of different responses. I call it hurling verbal grenades. Just because a verbal grenade has been hurled my way doesn't mean I have to reach in my pouch and pull out one that has equal TNT or
Mhm.
even worse.
That's
I
true.
don't have to hurl a verbal grenade at all. I can say, "Hey, the verbal grenade you hurled at me, that hurt."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, because you get into those moments where, and I've been guilty of this myself, of saying things that you can't take back. And this is why, I try to avoid arguments as much as possible, because once you say something, you put it out there, you
Mm-hmm.
can't immediately just take it back. Sorry, I'm sorry doesn't help.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't benefit anybody. If somebody had said something to me, and being a father and everything, and have custody of my son, I've heard a lot of things. I've been heard weekend dad. I've been heard you ain't ish. I've been heard a lot of stuff, and you constantly get told that time and time again from people, or from the other party, and you know, your first thing is to, man, I want to say something back. I want to say something that's equally or more painful than what they're saying to me, because this is how they're treating me. So I should say something back. But then you sit back and you say, well, what is it going to benefit?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is going to be the consequence of me saying that, oh, just for example, oh, you're homeless, or saying that, well, I may be this, but you ain't nothing but a whatever, whatever, whatever. Whatever verbiage you want to put in there, but you want to say something that's just equally tick for tack, that's gonna be more painful or equally as painful what you're saying to you. But I think we missed the consequences part. If I say this, what is ultimately is going to be the consequence that I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
suffer, because this person is emotionally torn for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're reacting towards me for whatever reason, whether it's a action and reaction. They're having they're having this reaction because of my action, and they're not aware of the consequence. I'm aware of the consequence. I need to take more control over this conversation, so we can eliminate saying something that we don't want to say.
Yeah. And I like that. When you take control, now you feel empowered. You're in control of your emotions.
Yes,
And you're not
absolutely.
allowing other people to control your emotions and manipulating them.
Exactly. And I can tell you from a management standpoint, how you have to be more in control of your emotions, because you have employees that will say something to you, and it may not be like detrimental to, like, they need to be fired, but they'll say stuff to you, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, technically I can't really say anything back. I want to,
Mm-hmm.
but it would jeopardize my job if I say something back, because I
Uh,
can be the bigger person.
See, everything you're saying, you're making choices in your head between what you're thinking and. But if I verbalize it, that's exactly the way I heard it or want to say it. What's that going to do to my job security?
There you go.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I pretty much worked in union environments, and you really don't want to, like, you don't want to be the person that always get caught because there's a union issue against you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because somebody can say somebody can say something to me, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, did they just say that? And then you got to go back and ponder on it, like, okay, well, what violation of the law did they do? Like, is this a canon that they just violated? No, this ain't a canon. Like, what did they violate for me to go back at them? And then you realize, like, man, it's just words. They didn't say anything that violated anything.
Yeah.
But because you're taking it personally,
Mm-hmm.
it's a violation of you. So now you want to react.
Yes.
Now you want to show them what it is. Like, oh, well, I'm the one that's in charge. I'm running the department. You're not about to show me up in front of all the employees. And then that reaction gets the person in management in trouble.
Right. So what you could do instead is there's certain phrases we use when our feelings have been hurt. We don't have to immediately respond. We can say, yeah, I need some time to process that. Let me sleep on that. Let me table that. And we can always come back to later on to a discussion later on once we have a time to process our emotions and to deal with our emotions rationally rather than dealing with them feeling like our emotions have been ruffled. And we have to react tit for tat.
I like that. I like that.
So you can come back and say, I really wanted to sleep on this, and what you said to me really was hurtful. I really would like an opportunity for us to work through this and get past it, and not for it to establish that the relationship we have had in the past, a good relationship we've had in the past.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Okay, so now let me ask you this. What are some signs that someone is overextending themselves emotionally or mentally?
Okay. It's paying attention to your emotions and what it's doing to your emotions.
Mm.
It's let me back up for a moment. Let me say this. I had my train of thought. The older I get, the more introspective I have become.
Okay.
And so the older I get, I'm paying attention to what makes me tick.
Okay.
And what has helped me to deal with things. Sometimes, let me back up. So sometimes we acknowledge that we are irritable. Sometimes when we feel like we're overextended, we can feel tired, even after resting, difficulties concentrating, feeling withdrawn from other people. It could be changes in our appetite, changes in our sleep patterns, physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, muscle aches. And then I said to you earlier about self-talk. And so it's engaging in negative self-talk, even feelings of inadequacy,
Right.
feeling of being critical of ourselves or other people.
Right.
Okay, so all those could be symptoms of feeling overextending ourselves. And so that introspection can lead me to recognizing that and how do I want to deal with that.
Okay. Now, I've known some people that I would consider overextending themselves mentally. They have
Mm-hmm.
a lot going on. There's something they always got to take care of. There's something that's happening, and they're trying to handle it all put it on their shoulders. And even when you see, and I don't. I'm going to throw this out there because I don't think it's a bad example. But when you look at celebrities and all of the attention that they're getting, all of the negative feedback, the controversial feedback, there's a positive feedback in there somewhere, but it doesn't trump all of the negative stuff that they have going on. But then they also got to go out there and they still got to be in the limelight, produce, be in a movie or be in gymnastics, and then you see that they all are taking, mental days or mental years off because they're not used to being in that type of limelight.
Mm-hmm.
And, would you say that in those situations, in those occupations, that there is that they're overextending themselves emotionally and mentally by consuming all that information, whether they want to or not, it's still consuming a lot of information that is disrupting them emotionally at sometimes and disrupting them mentally at sometimes.
Sure, sure. And they're not the only occupation, of course. I often say two people can have the same occupation, the same stressors, but one person deals with it. It's affecting them in every negative way.
Right.
They're turning, as you said, turning to alcohol, turning to drugs,
Yeah.
withdrawing. They're stressed out. That they've got all kinds of medical and physical symptoms of stress. And another person has the same job, the same stressors, but it seems like things are rolling off of them.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, oh, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And you might say, well, gee, it could be their psychological makeup.
Yeah.
Or it's just how people deal with it differently. And I'm back to that again. I keep it simple, keep it consistent. It's that positive self-talk that they say.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was just to share, let me just share with you just maybe 30 seconds. I had this really, really stressful job. I was working with the Federal Employee Assistance Program, dealing with about 50 different federal agencies across the country. And I could be dealing with 30 different things in a given day, and I couldn't wrap up everything all in one day. I had to wait for people to get back with me about this, that, and the other. I was seeing clients for counseling. It took me an hour and a half to see a person in counseling, but then it took me another hour to input all that data into the computer. I was dealing with presentation topics and critical incidents. And I would say to people who I was supervising, I'd say, this job can swallow you up like a tsunami
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have good organizational skills.
Right.
And so, how can you take a very, very stressful job and how can you make it an asset and say, I really like my job because I was in charge of my own schedule?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have other people telling me you need to see so and so at this time, or this is what you need to do each day. No, it was all on me. And so my adage was, if supervisors didn't get complaints about me, then they believed I was doing a good job. And I had great relationships with people I never would meet in life. But they may be across the country, but they knew my voice, they knew my name, and they knew that I was representing their employee assistance program. But it's how you deal with stress.
Right. Right.
And you can either let it affect you negatively, or you can get on top of it and through your self-talk and say, and it's a very empowering feeling when you say, I'm controlling how I'm feeling.
It is. It is. It's realizing that you are a step above the rest. And there's not too many people on a level where they can control their emotions, they can control their thinking, they can even control their actions. And sometimes it's really that self-talk, as you have stated, and realizing, what do you have to lose? The consequences behind whatever action that you're going to have. It has to be a well thought out plan of action in any situation that can that has any way of jeopardizing what your future looks like. Whether that's in a job, whether that's in a relationship, whether you're talking to friends, whether you and your friends are out and the situation happens, you have to, sometimes in the heat of the moment, you can't think that fast about what's going to happen next, but you got to make the best decision.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where that critical thinking comes in, because if you're paying attention, and this is some of the things I try to teach my son, if you're paying attention, you can see kind of how the situation is going to unfold before it even happens, and then you can make the right decision. But if you're not paying attention, or you're not, or your awareness is not really high, because you can walk down the street and you can see another person walk right past you. Now, my awareness would tell me to look over my shoulder just in case the person doubles back, right? Somebody else's awareness will say, well, keep on walking and don't think twice about it. It's two different levels of awareness, but one person is going to get walked upon from behind and possibly robbed, where the other person is already under the suspicion or idea that, you know what, there is a 50% chance possibility this person may try to double back. Let me just look over my shoulder a little bit so they don't know that I'm watching and they'll think twice about it. It's just a level of awareness and being in control of the actions, being in control of the scenario, but it also contributes to that level of awareness as well.
Yeah. And we're back to introspection again. The older you are, the more you've developed those skills.
Yeah.
Call it street smarts or whatever you want to call it. Awareness or experience. That you find that what you're using is working. And I always say that it always works as long as I keep using things that I've determined that worked for me. That only stops working when I stop using those skills.
Exactly. That is a major fact right there.
And I also say that I like to be the person when other people are losing their heads, that I keep mine by not freaking out, by not saying things, the sky's falling. Know how to process events, how to deal with things rationally, logically, without emotion or positive emotions. Having a sense that I've dealt with previous challenges in the past. If I employ the same templates, I can deal with current and future ones too.
Yeah.
I can look at things as challenges without looking at things as obstacles. Obstacles are things we avoid. Challenges we usually get psyched up for.
I agree. But Steve, thank you for coming on to the show. I know my fans is going to really appreciate the information that was provided today. Farewell fans, make sure you drop it in the comments. What were your thoughts about the interview? Steve, is there any last words you want to give the audience?
I can't think of any other than it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to your show, and to the audience, thank you very much. I hope that you have found this both entertaining and informative.
All right, farewell fans. We'll catch y'all on the next go around. Peace.